Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we have a new life story. Let's begin.
At my own birthday party, I saw the glint in my mother-in-law's eye a split second before she leaned over to whisper in my husband's ear. I'd learned over the years that nothing Margot said at these gatherings was ever truly benign. But this time, I caught the instant shift in Daniel's posture. Shoulders tense, knuckles white around his glass. Before I could react, the back of his hand whipped across my cheek, the world tilting sideways as I crashed to the marble floor. For a moment, there was only ringing silence and the pounding of my own heart, the sound of blood in my ears. I tasted copper, sharp and metallic, and as I tried to steady myself on the cold tile, I realized everyone was watching, and no one was moving to help. As Daniel turned away, a slow, bitter laugh bubbled up from my chest, startling even me. The sound echoed through the silent room, stopping him dead, his face drained of color. My fingers clenched around the phone, still glowing on the edge of the table. The message opened like a warning. The latest trust disbursement from the Wentworth family fortune depended on continuous, unblemished marital status. No divorce, no legal separation, not even a rumor. For years, this rule had been their leash on Daniel, and by extension, on me. My hands trembled as I quietly forwarded the most recent incriminating email to a secure server. The last piece of my plan had clicked into place at that very moment while the pale New York dawn filtered in through floor-length curtains. Curtains Margot herself had chosen, costing more than my entire first car. I snapped my laptop shut just as the bathroom door swung open, steam rolling out. Daniel emerged, towel slung low on his hips, the lean lines of his body still attractive, but his eyes vacant, glassy, their warmth long since faded. "Happy birthday, Avery," he said, the words flat as if recited from memory. He bent to kiss my cheek, his lips cold against my skin despite the heat of his shower. I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected for depositions and jury trials, a smile that could hide any emotion behind polished, professional calm. "She's always been generous," I replied, my voice as smooth as silk, betraying none of the ice forming in my chest. It was so thoughtful of Margot to arrange everything. He glanced at my closed laptop, but didn't ask. That, more than anything, told me how far gone he was. Years ago, he'd have teased me about work, tried to lure me back to bed, or joked about my ambition. That Daniel was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, a man whose responses to his family had become automatic, as if he'd been trained to respond on cue. When he left for the day, off to another morning at the Wentworth family office, I retreated to my walk-in closet, the only space in our Upper East Side apartment untouched by the invasive surveillance Margot had insisted on installing under the guise of security. 3 months earlier, during a sleepless night, I discovered the tiny, sophisticated cameras hidden among the crown molding. I hadn't removed them. Instead, I'd learned to feed the system a seamless loop of normalcy whenever I needed privacy. In the closet's back wall, nearly invisible, was a slim panel. I pressed my thumb to the seam, and it slid open with a whisper, revealing my cache. Waterproof cases filled with hard drives, a backup laptop, 3 prepaid phones, and a small stack of cash. My emergency kit. My weapons. On paper, I was the Wentworth family's dream. A Columbia law graduate, partner track at one of Manhattan's most elite firms, regular volunteer for the city's top charities, the loyal, unflappable wife of the Wentworth heir. For 4 years, I played the part. Margot parading me before every board, every gala, every glossy magazine profile. To outsiders, we were flawless, a modern American dynasty. No one suspected the reality behind the perfect makeup, the expensive gowns, the cultivated social media. No one saw the case I was quietly building, detail by damning detail, to bring down the entire Wentworth empire. It began with numbers, discrepancies in family ledgers, shell companies in tax havens, subsidiaries routed through countries with opaque banking laws. At first, I thought it was just creative accounting, the kind practiced by every old money family. Then the meeting started. Late nights when Daniel came home glassy-eyed, withdrawn, less himself with every passing month. I saw how Margot would lean in at family gatherings, whispering something that changed his mood instantly, how he would go from easy laughter to blank compliance in a heartbeat. I'd spent 3 years defending corporate clients against government fraud investigations. I knew what money laundering looked like. I knew, too, the cold signature of psychological manipulation. The day I found Daniel standing motionless in our study, staring at a video message from his cousin Patrick, another link in the family's web, was the day I started my own investigation in earnest. That night, I brought my first burner phone and began building the archive. Securely stored on encrypted drives, I compiled everything. Records of offshore transfers, audio files of family meetings where Margot and her allies discussed conditioning Daniel for responsibility, evidence of market manipulation and political bribes. The most recent file, a photo taken just 24 hours before, showed Dr. Charles Benedict, Daniel's so-called childhood therapist, stepping into Margot's private office on Park Avenue. The same man listed in the family documents as behavioral consultant, drawing $30,000 a month from a shell company. As I added it to my archive, I realized the final piece of my puzzle had fallen into place. My watch read 7:12 a.m., almost time to become Avery Wentworth again. I closed the secret panel, slipped on a navy skirt suit, a classic conservative cut for court that morning, and practiced my expressions in the mirror. Surprise, gratitude, deference, devotion. The very faces I'd worn for years, masking my contempt with a veneer of grace. Today's docket included a hearing on a securities case that would be over by noon, leaving me just enough time to change for my birthday dinner at Margot's favorite riverside restaurant. As I dabbed foundation over a faint bruise, last week's accident, an elbow in the kitchen that Daniel swore he didn't remember, I rehearsed my lines. Nothing, even fear, would show. Not tonight. Daniel reappeared, perfectly pressed, his tie a shade too formal for work. "You look lovely," he said, voice robotic. "Thank you, darling." I straightened his collar, studying his face for any trace of the man I'd loved. There was nothing left. "Don't let your mother overdo the surprises." His smile flickered. "She only wants what's best for us." That word, perfect, had become their mantra. Perfect marriage, perfect legacy, perfect control. As I gathered my files and phone, my screen flashed with a text from Margot. "Wear the blue Alexander McQueen. Daniel loves you in that color." Another command, dressed as care. I replied with a thankful emoji, but placed a crimson dress in my bag. A small rebellion, but I savored it. In the Uber to the courthouse, I divided my mind, slipping back into the persona my clients trusted. Focused, ethical, unflappable. I smiled at the doorman, glided through security, and let myself be seen as nothing but the reliable Mrs. Wentworth, an act so familiar it was almost next to nature. Only when I reached my chambers did I check my secure app. "The SEC got your latest documents. Final piece coming?" the message read. I smiled as I typed back, "Tonight." Little did Margot know, her elaborate birthday trap was about to trigger the Wentworth downfall. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of courtroom routine, motions, objections, polite legal sparring that never quite managed to pull my mind from what was coming that evening. The real trial would not be in front of a judge, but on the rooftop of one of New York's most exclusive riverfront restaurants, under the sharp gaze of the city's elite. Even as I cross-examined a witness, my mind rehearsed the sequence of the night to come. Every line, every calculated smile, every strategic move that would finally snap the invisible chain Margot had wound around my life. By noon, the hearing ended with a brief handshake from the opposing counsel. Nice work, Avery, as always. And I was back in the car, the city's late spring sunshine glancing off glass towers. My phone vibrated with a reminder from Margot. Arrive at 6. The guests are looking forward to seeing you. I replied promptly, making sure my tone sounded grateful. In reality, I was cataloging every interaction, every subtle cue, as evidence in the case I'd been building for years. Back home, I changed quickly, swapping the navy suit for the crimson dress, a color Margot loathed, but one that made me feel unassailable. I pinned my hair up in a classic twist, applied understated makeup, and selected simple pearl earrings. Before leaving, I slipped into the closet sanctuary one last time, checking the secure server. The files were uploading. Time to release to federal authorities and the press at a trigger word, or if my phone detected a sudden impact. My insurance policy was live. The car delivered me to the Wentworth's chosen venue, a modern marvel of glass and steel, perched at the edge of the Hudson, where the river caught the last red of sunset. The maitre d' greeted me by name. "Mrs. Wentworth, your family is waiting upstairs." And for a moment, the script felt almost too familiar. But I had studied every line, every player. Inside, the rooftop had been transformed. Dozens of orchids gleamed on mirrored tables, crystal lights suspended from nearly invisible wires. Margot's signature was everywhere, down to the shade of the napkins and the scent of the air, which she preferred pumped with a hint of peony. Guests mingled, their faces a who's who of New York's legal, financial, and political worlds. Not a single colleague of mine, only the hand-picked circle loyal to the Wentworth brand. Margot swept toward me in navy Chanel, her silver bob perfectly in place, eyes alert for the smallest deviation from her plan. "Avery, darling," she said, embracing me, her perfume enveloping me like a velvet snare. "I see you decided on red. How unexpected." "It felt right," I replied, matching her tone, warmth on the surface, steel beneath. Daniel stood beside her, as polished as ever, but with a blankness to his smile, his movements too smooth to be truly voluntary. He kissed my cheek, murmured, "Happy birthday," and drifted away to greet a cluster of guests, every gesture observed by Margot. "Everyone important is here," Margot said, her arm looped into mine, as she led me through the glittering crowd. Senator DeWitt, the justice from the appeals court, 2 presidents from the banks. "I hope you realize how much we all value you." She said it as if it were a warning, not a compliment. I accepted a glass of champagne from Patrick, Daniel's cousin, the family's unofficial legal fixer, who leaned in close. "Glad you could make it, Avery. Wouldn't want to miss tonight." His tone was careful, measured, his eyes flicking to the doors as a silver-haired man entered, Dr. Benedict, the so-called therapist. Patrick excused himself to intercept Benedict. I watched them speak in low, urgent tones, their posture tense, their smiles brittle. I drifted closer, using a waiter's arrival as cover. "A must accelerate the protocol," Patrick muttered, his back to the room. Benedict's reply was clinical, precise. "The trust cannot be extended again. Instability is a risk, but if Daniel isn't fully compliant, the board will intervene." They noticed me and instantly pivoted, greeting me as if nothing had passed between them. Benedict's handshake was cold, his gaze clinical. "Mrs. Wentworth, a pleasure. You look radiant." "Thank you, doctor. It's been, 15 years since you treated Daniel?" He smiled thinly. The Wentworths have always been more like family than clients. Throughout the next hour, I performed my role flawlessly. The devoted wife, the charming birthday girl, the ideal Wentworth addition. All the while, I observed every dynamic, every sideways glance, every shift in Daniel's affect. Margot was the sun around which every guest orbited. Daniel, when he appeared at my side, was watched even more intently, as if the entire outcome of the evening depended on his compliance. Twice I caught Benedict watching us, with his phone in hand, making notes with the detachment of a scientist recording the progress of an experiment. The party moved to dinner, Margot orchestrating the seating plan so that Daniel sat to my right, herself at the head, with Benedict positioned directly opposite me. I felt his eyes on me with every exchange, cataloging my every word, every gesture. At the sound of a crystal glass tapped delicately, Margot stood, instantly commanding the attention of the room. "Before we dine, a toast to my wonderful daughter-in-law. 5 years ago, Daniel brought home a remarkable woman, and we all knew instantly she was special." She held my gaze, her smile perfect, her eyes colder than ice. "Avery has become everything the Wentworth family values. Loyal, discreet, committed to our legacy." Applause followed, dutiful if not entirely enthusiastic. I returned her smile, reading the real message in her words. "We own you, and now the clock is ticking." As the first course arrived, oysters, Margot's favorite, I shifted in my seat, feeling the press of the diamond bracelet I'd received as a gift. It was beautiful, heavy, and in that moment felt exactly like a manacle.
Dinner was a meticulously orchestrated ritual, each course and conversation designed to reinforce Margot's power. The guests, the judge, the senator, the old friend from the Landmarks Commission, each made their obligatory remarks, each toast more hollow than the last. Daniel remained silent at my side, occasionally reaching for my hand with a stiffness that had become second nature. Every time Margot spoke, his eyes seemed to search hers for guidance, as if awaiting cues. The glimmer of the man I'd married was lost behind a mask of obedience. The main course cleared, Margot nodded to the staff, who rolled in an elaborate display of gifts. Every box, every ribbon, every card carried the subtle message that I was the Wentworth's prize, their possession, not their equal. Daniel helped me with the largest box. Inside, a designer handbag I'd admired months ago, but never mentioned aloud. The precision of the gesture chilled me. Margot's reach extended into every detail of my life. Then came her chosen moment. The lights softened, phones rose into the air, and Margot took the center of the floor. Daniel and me positioned on either side like statues. Her voice was honeyed, her tone controlled. "Before dessert, a very special announcement about the future of our family," she purred, the words landing heavily. Her hand found Daniel's shoulder, her grip precise and rehearsed. "Avery has been a treasure to us these past 5 years, a pillar of strength as Daniel's wife, loyal, loving, and devoted." 5 years, the exact requirement for the next trust disbursement. I watched Daniel's expression freeze, the faint tremor in his hand as Margot leaned close, lips to his ear. "Remember your duty," she whispered. It was not a suggestion. In the tense silence, her words carried further than she realized. I felt the room shift, the air thick with anticipation, every guest now complicit in whatever was about to happen. Daniel's voice broke the silence, flat and strange, a recitation. "You betrayed us." I blinked, keeping my composure as the room fell to a hush, all eyes on us. Margot's smile widened with satisfaction. Her script was unfolding perfectly. "What do you mean?" I asked, my tone calm,
though my heart hammered in my chest. "You know about the investigation," he replied, each syllable measured, mechanical. "The files, your contacts at the commission." A wave of gasps rippled around the terrace. This was Margot's insurance, public exposure, humiliation, a narrative of betrayal to shield the family from any federal investigation. Her allies reached for their phones, recording every second. But as I braced for the next line, Daniel's hand moved with stunning speed, a sharp slap that cracked the air and sent me stumbling into the marble table. For 3 heartbeats the world stilled. Blood welled on my lip. The cold surface pressed against my cheek as the first pain registered. Before Margot could spin the story further, something in me broke. Some final, tired patience for performance. A laugh escaped me, clear and true, ringing across the silent rooftop. It wasn't madness. It was the joy of knowing I'd reached the end of their script. "Perfect timing, Margot," I said, my voice loud and steady, blood on my lip. "You couldn't have planned it better." Confusion flickered in her eyes for the first time, uncertainty clouding the mask. "She's unwell," Margot said to Daniel, but he stood frozen, horror dawning as he stared at his own hand. "What did I just—" His voice faltered, the haze of programming beginning to fracture. I stood, dabbing at my mouth with a napkin. "You might want to check your phones," I announced to the assembled guests, every one of them still filming. "You've all just witnessed a perfect demonstration of the Wentworth conditioning, the same program detailed in the evidence now in the hands of the authorities." A fresh wave of shock moved through the crowd. I met Margot's gaze and saw, for the first time, something close to fear. 5 years, Margot. That was your requirement for Daniel's inheritance. But an assault in front of witnesses, that's going to complicate things for your legal team. Realization dawned on her, quickly replaced by rage. "You provoked this," she hissed, her composure unraveling. "I didn't need to," I replied. "All I had to do was wait and document." I gestured to the wall of phones still recording. Now, so has everyone else. The puzzle I'd spent years building, the money, the fraud, the manipulation, was suddenly public, exposed not in a courtroom, but on the screens of every power broker in the room. My phone vibrated, a coded alert. My evidence package, triggered by the physical blow, was transmitting to federal agents and select journalists. Headlines were already beginning to light up screens around the terrace. The collapse Margot had always feared was happening, and there was nothing she could do to stop it.
Margot's composure began to unravel as a chorus of phone alerts swept through the rooftop. The first headline blinked on a screen. "Wentworth family under federal investigation," followed by others in quick succession. Social media lit up. The carefully maintained illusion of the Wentworth dynasty dissolving in real time as guests watched, their faces frozen in a mix of awe, fear, and self-preserving calculation. Margot made a last attempt to seize control. "Avery has been under enormous stress at work," she declared, her tone turning concerned. "We've been worried about her well-being for some time." It was classic gaslighting, an attempt to recast my evidence and the bruises on my cheek as symptoms of instability. I didn't give her the satisfaction of responding directly. Instead, I turned to Dr. Benedict, whose clinical detachment had slipped into visible panic. "Perhaps you'd like to explain Project Sycamore, Doctor?" I asked. "The behavioral modification protocol you implemented in Daniel's adolescence. $30,000 a month to ensure he followed family directives, with Margot's, explicit authorization?" His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, his medical jargon failed him. He managed only,
That's confidential therapy information. I cut him off. Is that what you call programming a child to respond to verbal and physical triggers, doctor? Is that what you call a lifetime of conditioning for the sake of a trust fund? All eyes were on him now, including Daniel's. My husband had slumped into a chair, his head in his fans, his breathing ragged as shards of memory began surfacing. Summers at the lake house, lessons with Dr. Benedict, the headaches after every family council. Margot, cornered, reached for one last thread. James? Daniel? Tell them none of this is true. But Daniel looked at her, really looked, and what showed on his face was not compliance, but horror. You did this to me, he said softly, voice raw with the truth finally breaking free. You made me this way. I don't even know what I wanted. My whole life I've done what you told me, what Benedict told me. He turned to me, anguish etched deep in his features. Avery, was any of it real? I felt the sting of my split lip, the weight of the years I'd lost. The beginning was real, before they doubled down on their control. I stayed because I believed you were still in there, somewhere. The doors to the rooftop slid open and two men in dark suits strode in, federal agents, their badges held low but visible. Mrs. Wentworth, one said, addressing Margot with professional calm, we have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and documents in your possession. Margot's hand trembled as she accepted the paperwork, her eyes darting for exits. Her allies, senators, judges, bankers, began to inch away from her, already calculating their own survival. Agent Kim, whom I'd been working with for months, gave me a nearly imperceptible nod as he moved to secure the scene. Guests clustered in nervous groups. The party had become a crime scene. Benedict, white-faced, whispered urgently to one of the agents, angling for a deal. I addressed the room. Anyone here who comes forward voluntarily will be seen very differently from those who wait for subpoenas. The old alliances began to fracture instantly, old loyalties dissolving faster than champagne bubbles. Within minutes, the once invincible Wentworth legacy was bleeding out on marble tile and silk carpet. Daniel sat motionless, hands shaking as memories crashed through him. How long did you know? He whispered. 3 years, I answered quietly. It started with small things. The way you changed after family meetings, the vacant look in your eyes. When I found Benedict's payments, I knew. He pressed his palms to his eyes. They've been doing this to me since I was a boy. My own family. The pain in his voice was deeper than any wound. Police lights washed the walls outside in blue and red. The federal agents moved with quiet efficiency, securing evidence, collecting statements, escorted Margot, once the queen of New York society, down the elevator in silence. As the crowd thinned, Daniel approached me, tears streaming down his face. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed, voice hoarse. It will take time, I said, not unkindly, but at least now you have the chance to find out. The rooftop was nearly empty now, the city shining on beyond the glass. My phone buzzed. Another alert. The files had been received. The story already making headlines from Manhattan to Washington. Years of manipulation, fraud, and abuse exposed by the woman they thought would be the easiest to control. For the first time in a decade, I was free. I left the rooftop alone, descending in the empty elevator as the city's pulse throbbed on the other side of the glass. My reflection in the gilded panel showed a woman with a bruised lip and wild hair, but there was relief in my posture I hadn't felt in years. Outside, as the warm spring night wrapped around me, the air tasted new, no longer filtered through the scent of Margot's perfume or the constant hum of caution. I walked several blocks before calling a car, letting the chaos at the restaurant fade behind me, my heels echoing against the wet pavement, as if to prove that I could move forward on my own, step by step, without anyone's permission. Back at the apartment, I changed out of the crimson dress, folding it carefully. It was the last artifact of that former life I planned to keep. I packed a small suitcase, just the essentials, the backup laptop, a change of clothes, Leah's favorite stuffed animal, given to me years before when she was just a baby cousin, not yet entangled in the family's web, and a single photo of myself at my law school graduation, smiling, sunlight on my face, Margot's hand nowhere to be seen. I checked the secure server. Everything had been delivered, every file time-stamped, every record traceable. I texted Agent Kim. "It's done. Thank you." The reply was swift. "You did the right thing. Let us handle the rest." For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to check the door locks twice or glance over my shoulder. I sat by the window, letting the quiet of my own space settle around me. The city outside felt enormous but not menacing, as if I had been given back the right to choose where to look, where to walk, what to hope for. The news coverage was relentless, the downfall of a dynasty, the accusations of manipulation and fraud, the unraveling of power that had once seemed untouchable. Some reporters speculated about the mystery informant. Others dissected every detail of the Wentworth's fall from grace. My name was mentioned rarely, if at all. A calculated choice. I wanted freedom, not fame. By dawn, my phone was full of messages, some from old friends, a few from colleagues who wrote in code or sent nothing more than an emoji, a silent show of solidarity. Sophie, a junior partner at my old firm, wrote, "You are always braver than anyone knew. The city owes you more than it will ever admit." I smiled at that, thinking of how long I'd been called soft for refusing to play the family's games, for believing that silence was not the same as peace. I spent the next week in a quiet hotel on the edge of the city, meeting with agents, answering careful questions, reviewing timelines. Daniel checked into a clinic upstate, beginning what the papers called a journey of recovery. We exchanged a single message, "I'm sorry." I replied, "I hope you find yourself." That was all there was left to say. I walked through parks at sunrise, ate breakfast alone in small cafes, relearned how to fill a day on my own terms. It wasn't glamorous or cinematic. The best moments were the quietest: a stranger's smile, a book finished in a single sitting, the steady, unremarkable rhythm of days that belonged only to me. Margot's empire crumbled, the courts froze her accounts, the board ousted her, and her name became a warning whispered among the city's elite. Dr. Benedict faced federal charges. The senator and banker distanced themselves with the speed of true professionals. The old alliances shattered. For every loss, there was a strange sense of justice. Not triumph, not revenge, but the restoration of balance that had been denied for so long. Months passed. I started a new job, this time for a nonprofit advocacy group, using my legal skills to help women and men claw their way out of family contracts designed to crush them. I became known for something other than my last name. Sometimes I'd see Daniel's name in a news item about addiction recovery or mental health reform. He was learning to live without the script his family had written for him. I hoped, privately, he would find peace. I wished him freedom more than forgiveness. One evening, as autumn painted the city gold, I returned to the riverside and watched the lights come on along the skyline. My phone buzzed, a message from Sophie. "There's a girl here asking for advice. She reminds me of you." I replied, "Tell her she's not alone. Tell her the end is never what they say it will be." I tucked the phone away and leaned against the railing, breathing in the chill air, free for the first time to decide what tomorrow would look like. Because sometimes the greatest power you can claim is the power to walk away and mean it. And sometimes, when they think they've erased you, you write yourself back into the story, on your own terms.
If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible or trapped by a family legacy you never chose, remember, you get to choose who you become even when the world writes another ending.